Howdy! My name is Korok Ray, and I am the director of the Maze Innovation Research Center. Thank you for joining us. This is our talk show, Innovation Matters. I'm delighted to welcome Catherine Flax to the show today in our first recording in the Maze Business School. And today we're here to welcome Catherine, to encourage her son to come to A&M.
Yes.
And to hear about her really interesting career and her time at Texas A&M and what it meant for her afterwards. So Catherine, welcome.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
Great, fabulous. So let's just tell, as we always do, just tell us a little bit about your life story, where you were born and raised, and how you came to Aggieland.
Sure. Well, I was born in Rhode Island, grew up in Massachusetts, and came to Texas A&M in 1982, which is an amazing 40 years ago. And I came actually as an engineering major, not knowing very much about what that really meant at the time. I knew I liked math, and so that was pretty much all I knew about that. And when I got here, realized pretty quickly that that was probably not my future. So I switched over to economics and ended up working on Wall Street for probably about 30 years, which is really what I do now.
Wow, great.
Yeah.
Where in Massachusetts did you grow up?
Newton.
Oh, great. Okay, great. I grew up in Andover, so I know.
How did I not know that?
Yeah, we didn't mention that. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
okay.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So, so economics, that's great. So, did you prefer macroeconomics? You have
yeah, definitely micro. Financial engineering was kind of really where I was so I minored in finance, did a lot of econometrics when I was here. And then I did go to grad school after A&M. A bit of that was just sort of not knowing exactly what I wanted to do. So I went to Brown, and again, still studied economics, but very much financial engineering kind of focus.
Okay, awesome. Now tell us about your time in Wall Street. I mean, I guess maybe unpack those 30 years for us.
Sure. Well, most of it has been sales and trading focused. Worked at a couple of big firms like Morgan Stanley and JP Morgan. Commodities, sales and trading mostly. Later on, I ended up running commodities with foreign exchange and emerging market sales and trading. Love markets, really a lot of fun. But I think for me, commodities, and particularly the energy commodities, are really interesting. We use them every day. And so it's something you can talk to your grandmother about, whereas, interest rate derivatives, you can probably go a long time without talking to anybody about that. So
That's right.
So really have loved that. And then about 5 years ago, became very, very interested in the intersection of technology and markets. And that's, it was a growing interest, but it became kind of acute. I sat on the board of a blockchain company and did a variety of other things. And I think that has really morphed into a lot of the work that I'm doing right now, which is more private equity and venture capital focused.
Okay, great. So you sort of shifted into technology 5 years ago or so?
Yeah, I will say, exactly. So I think having that financial engineering focus originally meant that I was always sort of dabbling in coding and things like that. And my focus, even though, at various points in time I had very client-facing roles, there was always a quantitative angle to that. I just feel like it's a good way to understand the world. So it was always sort of simmering in the background, but it definitely became more of a focus in the last 5 years. I'm still not a technologist, to be clear. That is definitely not what's going on. But I think it's just an important aspect of how these markets are developing.
Now, tell me about your transition from Texas A&M to Wall Street. What was it like coming from sort of Aggieland, moving to New York City?
Sure.
I mean, you grew up in the East Coast anyway, so you sort of know a little bit about the culture.
Sure. And I think the other thing for me, and different time, of course. So then there was no internet, and all the things that give us information today was not the way that we got information back in the day. And so I didn't really know anybody who had ever worked on Wall Street. It wasn't where my family had come from or anything like that. And so it was a very circuitous route to get there. I ended up, so as I said, went to grad school, did a couple other things before going to Wall Street. I taught at University of Nebraska for a little while. I definitely knew that was not my future, not a teacher of anything. And I issued municipal bonds for a little while, which was pretty interesting, but that was with the municipality. And so what I learned is that doesn't pay particularly well. And as a I had 2 kids at the time. I have 3 now, but just wanting to send my kids to school and things like that, I started to look around for other things. And at that time, I was actually in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and there was a trading floor that was just starting there, focused on commodities. And I knew nothing about oil and gas or anything like that, but I had a pretty decent background in derivatives pricing, and so I started on that trading floor and did that for about 3 years, and then moved actually to New York.
Okay, great. Now, in that 30 years, can you tell us what was the best experience, the best job you had, if you could say there was one?
Well, I have to, and this is just maybe a reflection also more of my personality than anything else, but what I'm doing right now, I would say, is what I'm enjoying the most. And so what I'm really focused on right now is I'm the president in a private equity firm focused on upstream oil and gas. But again, there's a big technology focus. But in addition, I sit on a lot of boards. And most of them are also at the intersection of energy and technology. And so what I really like about now is although a little too busy, I'm learning so much all the time. And so to me, that's the key to enjoying what you're doing. Right.
Okay, now let's do a little bit of a deep dive. So into the, say, on the energy side. So that seems like that's a common theme through
it kind of is, yes.
Through your career.
Yeah.
Tell us on technology, what are you seeing now in terms of latest trends or big opportunities in energy right now and in intersection with technology?
Absolutely. So we do have a big focus on clean tech, and there's definitely so much happening in how to think about ESG related or kind of cleaning up the world of oil and gas, but not as a cost, as a profit center. And so there really are ways, whether it's in more advanced and continuous methane detection, whether it's in, again, more advanced ways to do carbon sequestration, ways to do plugging and abandonment of wells that is much cheaper and much more sustainable in the long run, that are things that have historically been issues or problems for the industry, but now can really be leveraged to both do things just smarter, better, cheaper, but also potentially to make more money.
Okay, great. Before earlier, we talked about a little bit about Bitcoin mining.
Yes.
Wanted to just bring everyone up to speed. So one of the things that the Mays Innovation Research Center does is we focus on several areas, and Bitcoin is one of them. We have several events all year round, panel discussions. We bring in experts. So Texas is actually a huge hub for Bitcoin.
Totally.
If not the hub, the worldwide hub.
Right.
After the China crackdowns, a lot of those miners have moved over to Texas. And
absolutely.
Now, not just Texas, actually College Station. Within half an hour to 45 minutes of College Station, right in Rockdale are some of the biggest Bitcoin miners.
Well, the key for Bitcoin mining is inexpensive energy, right? I mean, that's the thing. And so when all of those miners left China, then what they were is on the search for cheapest energy possible.
Right.
And so we just did a project in South Dakota with some abandoned wells, gas wells, where essentially the developer of those wells had gone bankrupt, and so the gathering lines had never really been built. So the gas was stranded there.
Yeah.
The state of South Dakota was going to just have to plug the wells. Yeah. So we offered to do that for them, but to use the gas first. And so it was essentially an extremely inexpensive way to get access to gas and to mine lots of Bitcoin. So that's very, very cool. And so it's definitely part of our the work that we do as well. And it really that's the equation is where do you find the least expensive energy?
That's right. Do you see that area growing over time?
It's very interesting. So I think there's a number of competing factors, which means it's going to be interesting to see how it all shakes out.
Yeah.
So first of all, I think it's how do you find not just inexpensive energy, but inexpensive energy that you can somewhat rely on in terms of the stability of the flow of energy. And so I think in some haste, some of the Bitcoin miners that have gone up haven't necessarily been as, with a reliable source of energy. And I think, as you guys know, that there's the difficulty of mining Bitcoin ebbs and flows, and then the expense also, right? Yeah. And so sometimes those things are moving in the same direction, sometimes they diverge. Right. And so as things become less attractive, then I think it slows things down in terms of are people really investing in this space? We're in one of those moments right now, but it's not going to last. It always reverts at some point. So I do think that the interest level continues to be very, very strong. And so I think people continue to look, for where do they find those inexpensive sources. And then, of course, we're coming up on the halving of the Bitcoin. So to see what's really going to happen at that point is something people are keeping their eye on a lot too. And to be clear, we're not in the business of really gambling on Bitcoin prices, so we do hedge our Bitcoin exposure.
I see. That's great. If you are curious, you go on our YouTube channel. You'll see a lot of our mining panels. We did a big mining panel about a month ago, and we're doing a conference on Bitcoin in April 29th, and we will probably do a field trip to the Rockdale.
That's fantastic. Yeah. That's really cool.
That's right. They're trying to get some mining rigs up on the Rellis campus, which is 8 miles north of here.
Fantastic.
Big cyber security data enclave. So.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's great. No, I think, look, I mean, the thing is when you start to see countries, having Bitcoin be their currency and things like that, it's very difficult to imagine putting that genie back in the bottle. So, I mean, I do think cryptocurrency is here to stay. Yeah. And then it's more a question of which currencies are going to dominate and where's the liquidity going to be, and then you have all of these things like NFTs and things like that. As I'm not as interested in that personally, but that doesn't mean they're not real.
right. Yeah. So tell me about you said you were on the board of a blockchain startup?
So I'm not any longer, but that was a bit of kind of what got me initially interested. It was actually my former boss when I was at JP Morgan. When she left, she went to be the CEO of a company called Digital Asset Holdings, which is still one of the bigger blockchain companies, not crypto focused, but really just more blockchain infrastructure focused. And most of the big Wall Street firms invested in digital assets. Yeah. And I was at BNP Paribas at the time. We made an investment, and they asked me to sit on the board.
I see. Okay.
So it was great learning for me.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. That's great. So I'm curious. So we have some Aggie friends. I don't know if you know Andy Elwood.
Of course I know Andy. Yes.
So Andy actually gave, we kind of had a debate last year on Zoom. He's very much embedded in New York City.
Yes.
And very much in the crypto space.
Yes.
And here in Texas, we're kind of all Bitcoin all the time. Mm-hmm. And so it's interesting to see those two different perspectives. Tell us what you see in being in New York City about the crypto space broadly.
Yeah, what's interesting, and I know certainly, back when I was on the digital asset board, there was really a theme, and I think a bit of it was how to play defense if you're a big financial institution trying to not raise the eyebrows of regulators. Yeah. And so you heard a lot, people saying like, oh, I'm super interested in blockchain, but not at all cryptocurrency. And I think that was just because it felt dodgy to a lot of people. And they were like, oh, well, what bad things are happening? People buying in crypto, as if bad things don't happen with people buying things in dollars, by the way. But anyway, and so I think it was more just trying to make sure that people knew that, no, we're on the up and up. I think now it's a very different situation. All the major banks are actually quite involved in crypto. And so I think that there's now, even in the last 2 years, just a real acknowledgement that this is a real thing. It's a real currency. It's here to stay. So I do think that, it's changing a lot.
Okay, good. Well, to me, that's good news.
Yeah, I think so too.
I think that kind of innovation is great.
Yeah, agreed.
Tell me about you said you also do some investments in space. Tell us about how that's coming along.
Yeah, no, and I mean, to be clear, I am no expert at all, but I am an investor in a venture capital company called Astor Perkins, and their focus is space, defense, and survival. And I do this because I learn a ton. It's super interesting. And otherwise, I wouldn't really have the opportunity to get that deep into some of these innovations that are happening. But the space one is something I find really, really interesting. Also a little perplexing at times. There was a whole presentation that I received in that capacity about tourism, space tourism. And I totally get it. It's happening. There's a lot of investment being made in it. It's just not something that I'm super eager to do. I guess to each their own. But for me, like, one of the things that we were talking about earlier that I find really interesting is just the logistics aspect of this. Because obviously there are so many things that are happening in space. And so, like, in particular, this company that we've invested in is a logistics company that's actually just the one that takes the satellites, those last miles, and places them where they need to go. And frankly, I just hadn't ever thought about that being a thing. And then when you realize, of course, there's satellites being put up every day, and you can't just fling them up there. They have to actually be, this is an actual process. So just the learning about that, I think, is really exciting. And I just feel like There's so much happening in the world right now, and we see, headlines on the news, but to have that opportunity to just like peel it back a little bit more and understand why is this relevant or important, or how's it going to impact my life, and feel a little bit that way about quantum computing. I've sat through a lot of seminars now on it. Again, no expert at all, but it's just interesting to consider if our computing power could be multiplied that much, what would that mean for us as human beings? So that to me is really interesting stuff to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. So space is actually an interesting topic for us. This is an area our center is going to get into, partly because Texas A&M we've always had a very good aerospace department.
Right.
Space has always been a big industry in Texas with
Yes.
NASA and now with the two leading private space companies here.
Right.
But the university is now making a big push to make sure that space is interdisciplinary. It's across the whole campus. And a lot, really, exactly what you say. It's a whole. There's a whole economy of what happens up in space and low Earth orbit and.
Well, exactly, and I think to your point that this multidisciplinary way of thinking about this is super important, because I think people like me who maybe are like business focused think about things like space historically as either Star Trek or something that is just for deep scientists.
Yeah.
And the reality is that as things like space tourism evolve, or even more just work that's being done up there, all of the infrastructure that has to come up around it means that there's a whole lot of other industries, and all those industries need accountants and they need marketing people, and they need everything that normal companies need. And so there's an opportunity almost for everybody to get involved no matter what they do. So just learning about that is important.
Yeah. Exactly right. And so I think over time we'll have more programming on space, and also the students here will have more space specific events. We're running a 3D printing design competition this year, where the students are going to design a structure that can be 3D printed on the moon.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So cool.
So there's a company in Austin founded by Aggies called Icon, and they built the world's largest 3D printer that prints houses. And they have a division, which is their off-world division, which is essentially going to build the lunar housing, because
amazing.
You're not going to ship wood to the moon. You're going to use the lunar materials.
Right, exactly.
And so this project is to help. We're working with that company and also some other friends on campus.
It's incredible.
Yeah, it really is.
Well, and the other thing too that I find really amazing is companies that I know, like Toyota, that everybody knows as a car company, they're investing a ton in terraforming planets. And the only reason I even know that word is because I'm a huge Star Trek nerd. But I thought that wasn't a thing until now. They're actually like, that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of mind-boggling to think that this is becoming an actual reality.
That's right. It's amazing how science fiction really has become reality.
Well, I mean, if you really are into Star Trek, then you see, apart from the ability to beam people, pretty much everything else has been done.
Right? It came out of something.
Everything. I mean, the whole video conferencing, the whole communicator thing, everything else is there. I mean, the 3D printing, really. I mean, all of it is there.
Exactly right.
It's really incredible.
We just need teleportation.
That's it. We're so close. Just quantum computing can help us with that, because it's a lot of computing power.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. One thing we try to do on this talk show is our ultimate audience are students, and we want to expand the opportunities for our students and get them to open their minds and to do things that they never have dreamed before. I want to kind of drill down into the skills that you learned at A&M.
Yep.
And compare that to the skills that you developed in the workforce, or that you kind of acquired. And how, just kind of tell us about those two. I mean, I know things have changed a lot since you graduated, but still, what advice would you give to the next generation for skills that that are not taught in class, that they could and should develop?
Sure. I mean, I think for me, when I think back on my experience at A&M, one of the things that I really remember, particularly in my freshman year, was feeling very uncomfortable. I mean, I had grown up in Massachusetts. I had never stepped foot in Texas until literally my first day of class here.
Yeah.
I didn't really know much about A&M and its culture. I never knew anybody who had gone here, and I was in the Corps of Cadets, which I didn't know much about, but I just was like, oh, that looks like fun. I guess I'll do that. And it was a phenomenal experience. But what I learned at my time at A&M is making yourself uncomfortable can also feel not great in the moment, but you get so much growth out of that. And I think as human beings, we're so instinctively looking to be comfortable.
Yeah.
But if we can keep pushing ourselves to be uncomfortable, then you can just learn so much. And part of it is going to places that you've never been before and meeting people that are different from you and things like that, which is a huge part of what happened to me when I came to A&M.
Right.
But then I think continuing to find ways to put yourself in uncomfortable situations, I think has been sort of a hallmark for me of my career as well. And looking for those moments where when you feel like, oh, okay, now I'm comfortable, instead of saying like, oh, that's good, have like a little light that goes off that says, no, now you need to push yourself to the next thing. And so to me, that's a really big deal.
Okay. Now on the curriculum side, your education in economics, do you feel like that served you well? Do you feel like there could have been things that it could have taught you differently, or would you have supplemented with a different major? Or
so it's interesting when I look back at my time at A&M, definitely the programming classes that I took served me extremely well. I had no idea leaving that when I would go to Wall Street, that I would spend a fair amount of time actually I was never a programmer, but being on the desk, if you're on a trading desk, you're going to want to automate things. And I built a lot of big models and things like that really wouldn't have worked properly if I didn't have any programming skills. So I had no idea that was going to really be such a help as it was. And also I minored in finance, and the more technical like options valuations classes and things like that, again, I had no idea when I took them that those were going to be a huge part of what I was going to do professionally, but I thought they were really, really interesting. And so I think that what served me really well was I had probably a little bit more of a technical focus than maybe the average economics student at the time did. And that was really, really helpful. I think what I see kids now, because I do a lot, with Maze and particularly Aggies on Wall Street, there's so much exposure that the kids have now to what are the different jobs and what are the skills that you need for the different jobs. I definitely didn't have that when I was here. So I had no idea what a job on Wall Street would entail or what you would need to do to prepare for it or anything like that. So that for me was very much trial and error and just, kind of like finding my way. And so I'm and you can see now that the kids, because they have that information, they're able to position themselves so much more aggressively earlier on, which is great.
Now, would you also tell kids essentially? Let me try to interpret what you're saying. Would you encourage them to maybe go that extra mile to build up their technical skills?
100%.
100%.
Even more so now than it was then, right? And so because so much of what's happening in the world now is focused on technology, and again, it's not because you want to be a technologist, it's not because that's what you're focused on professionally, as much as it's about language and being able to really understand how to interact with people who are speaking a different language. And so, like, as you know, there was a time that I ran, I was the CEO of an artificial intelligence company. And I'm certainly not an expert in artificial intelligence, but taking just a couple classes just to be able to know this is what they mean when they say that really goes such a long way. And similarly with blockchain, really being conversant in that and understanding that. And frankly, almost anything, the work that I do now in upstream oil and gas, there's a lot of very technical aspects to that as well. And I'm not a petroleum engineer, but you still need to know enough to be able to understand what they're talking about. And so just always kind of trying to figure out where do you find that technical information and get conversant in it.
Okay, so now I'm going to play devil's advocate. So let's say I'm a kid, I'm a business student or an economics major listening to you saying, I could never supervise a company full of technical people or advise a kind of a technical board. What advice would you give to them? How do they build that confidence?
Sure. Well, I think one of the things is to really take a look at leaders that you admire and recognize that almost always they're going to be running companies where they couldn't possibly be experts in all of the things. I mean, somebody I admire, for instance, Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan, and I worked for him and I think very highly of him. He, of course, doesn't know what 90% of the people in the company do from the perspective of he couldn't sit in their seat. But, he takes the time, he's listened. And I think the other thing on the point of, what are things that people should focus on learning, that the development of real curiosity is so important, because if you're curious, you ask the questions, you can kind of understand where people are coming from, and not being afraid to look stupid and ask the stupid question. And so I'll give you another example real quick. I sit on the board of the independent system operator for the power grid of New England. So as you know, here in Texas, there were some real situations last winter. So we have the same sort of issues that face New England. I'm not an electrical engineer. I don't really understand exactly how a power grid works, but I've done a lot of work in and around that in markets for many, many years. So a big part of the fun of being on that board is you get to learn, but only if you're willing to ask the questions, because half the people in the room already know this stuff.
That's right.
So you have to be willing to say, like, okay, I'm going to be stupid here for a minute, and you have to dumb it down for me and explain. And if you're okay with doing that, you're going to learn a ton.
Exactly right. That's how I feel when I talk to my kids in Aggie robotics. They know way more than I do. Yeah. So,
and that's a cool thing, right? Well, none of us are ever going to get to the bottom of everything.
Yeah.
And so it's a question of, can you just dig deep enough to really begin to learn? And then it's a journey. The whole thing is a journey.
Right. Let me ask you about small company versus large company. You worked in both.
Yes.
What are your opinions, thoughts, reflections?
I personally have enjoyed both a lot, and I really do feel like there's value in having both experiences. There's really fun things about working in small companies where you can move quickly, you can make a lot of decisions, but you're never going to have the resources that you have in the big companies, where you can just really, really do. I mean, you kind of see it with a campus like A&M is huge.
Right.
You have tremendous resources. It's kind of like a big company.
Right.
But I think there's nice things about experiencing both in a career. And similarly, I almost tell every student that I come in contact with too, having an overseas experience as well is something that I really recommend, because even if you've traveled a lot, it's not the same as living somewhere and experiencing the business environment there.
For sure. Now, last question I want to ask you. Tell me, kind of unique. What's unique about you is you've been successful both as a woman and as a mom in Wall Street, which traditionally has been very, very male dominated. What tips, advice would you have to young women at A&M and beyond?
I in the nicest possible way, I never really thought of my coworkers as men or women. They're just my coworkers, and I kind of think that not obsessing about, how you're different in any way, but just trying to think about what are the ways that you can connect with people, because people are people. And one of the things I think is awesome about Wall Street is that it's very much a meritocracy. So, if you show up and you do a good job, then you get to move forward, and that's the way it works. It's kind of, what have you done for me lately a little bit, but it's also, it's a performance culture. And so if you like that, then you'll do well. And so I think giving people the benefit of the doubt and just trying to get to know people as people is just, the best way to do it, I think.
Fantastic. So, well, Catherine, we're just about out of time. I just wanted to thank you once again for taking the time to sit down with us. This is very interesting. You've had a really interesting career, a wide variety of experience, and we do hope to see you more often on campus.
I hope so too.
When your son hopefully enrolls soon.
Hope so. All right, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.